Welcome to the Season 2 finale of From the Bridge. This is Rick Jones. We've had a lot of fun with a lot of great guest anglers this season, and today's show is no different. Today's special holiday theme is thankfulness. My guest angler is the longtime sports announcer Thom Brennaman, who lost his job as broadcaster for the Cincinnati Reds this summer and was suspended by Fox Sports when he used a homophobic term in the press box that was caught over the airways. He will discuss this and his new goal of talking to corporate groups and student athletes about the power of words as a way to bring about social justice and sensitivity to all peoples. We'll take the final trip up on the old Soapbox and a holiday memory trip on the road with Rick. It's getting cold out here on the water in December, so let's head to shelter from the bridge. When I was a kid, one of my heroes was the longtime sports editor and columnist for my hometown newspaper, the Atlanta Journal, Furman Bisher. Furman Bisher was the great sports writer of the South, and I look forward to reading his columns each and every day. An annual tradition was his Thanksgiving column, where he told us what he was thankful for that year. He wrote his first column for the AJC in 1950, but it wasn't until 1955 that he began the annual Thanksgiving Thankful column. Furman Bisher died in 2012 at age 93. In honor of him and his annual Thanksgiving column, here's my list of things I'm thankful for in 2020. I'm thankful for cool, clear fall days in the South Carolina Lowcountry, for the ways the sweetgrass blooms turn from purple to white, for sweetgrass baskets and the black artisans that still make them by hand, for the breeze on my dock overlooking the Bohicket River, and for the wonderful blue crabs I catch off that dock. I'm thankful for gumbo, both mine and anybody else's. I'm thankful for the many mentors who have made a difference in my life. Too many to name, but I thank each of you and think of you regularly. I'm thankful for Coca-Cola Zero Sugar that tastes like real Coke. I love Coke Zero with a bowl of just popcorn. I don't like a beer with my popcorn. I like a Coke with my popcorn. I'm thankful for the Augusta National and the Masters, and for both game day being there and for Dustin Johnson winning like he did. I'm thankful for his graciousness in winning and the way he conducted himself. I'm thankful for the piece ESPN did on Vern Lundquist and his contributions to both college sports and golf. He mentioned the famous kick six in the Auburn-Alabama game and the great Tiger Woods shot at 16 as some of his most memorable moments. But I want to remind everybody, he called what I thought was the greatest college basketball game I ever saw when Duke beat Kentucky at the Spectrum in Philadelphia on Christian Laettner's last-second shot. Several years ago, I had the privilege of flying on an airplane sitting next to Vern Lundquist, and we had a wonderful conversation between Atlanta and New York. Just quite a gentleman and quite a legend. I'm thankful it looks like we're going to have some March Madness this year, even though it might be in a bubble in Indianapolis without any fans. I'm thankful for all of the college coaches I know and those I knew well who've passed on. I simply love coaches. I'm thankful for Jim Haney and Reggie Minton, who both recently retired from the NABC, and for all of their contributions to college sports and for their friendship. I'm thankful for John Swofford, who is retiring as commissioner of my favorite conference, the Atlantic Coast Conference. He did an amazing job for the ACC and had simply an amazing career. I'm thankful for the great job Anna Slive Harwood is doing for her dad's late charity, the Mike Slive Foundation. I'm thankful for Abe Madcore at the Sports Business Journal for his leadership and insights during this pandemic that really helped all of us through it. And he is simply one of the kindest people I know. And kindness really counts these days. I'm thankful for corn dogs, and I can't wait to get back to the State Fair of Texas to eat the best ones on the planet. I'm thankful that most Americans really do care about each other and want us all to do the right things. We just respectfully disagree about what those best things are. I'm thankful for my clients and look forward to helping each of them through better days. I'm thankful for and love my teammates at FishBait and Engagement, the best people I know who make me better each and every day. I'm thankful for this podcast, my amazing producer, Lindsay Collins, and for all the listeners out there. And I'm thankful for my family, for my kids, Jen and Rob, and Ryan and Celia, and for my grandboys, Ollie and Henry. I have not seen them since last Christmas and cannot wait to get back across the pond soon. Finally, I'm forever grateful to my wife, Charlotte, who actually puts up with this old pirate. It's been a great ride, and we're just getting started. My guest angler is the longtime sports broadcaster, Thom Brennaman. Thom grew up in a broadcaster's family as his dad, Marty Brennaman, was the longtime play-by-play broadcaster for the Cincinnati Reds from 1974 to 2019. Thom graduated from Ohio University and immediately joined the Reds broadcast team, calling TV games with Hall of Famer Johnny Bench. He later worked with the great Harry Carey, broadcasting Chicago Cubs games, and then became the first broadcaster for the Arizona Diamondbacks from 1998 to 2006. In 2006, he had a chance to return home to Cincinnati and joined his dad in broadcasting Reds baseball. He joined Fox Sports in 1994, broadcasting NFL and MLB games, and was the voice of the BCS when Fox had that contract from 2006 to 2009. Let's welcome Thom to the bridge. Hey, Thom, welcome to From the Bridge.
Thank you, Rick. It's always good to be with you. I hope you're doing well.
I am. Let me ask you this. You grew up in a broadcaster's family. Your daddy was a famous broadcaster. Did you know you always wanted to be a sports broadcaster?
No. In fact, I thought I wanted to be a lot of other things, but I just wasn't smart enough to be a lot of other things. I had thought about being a lawyer, and I thought about being a psychiatrist and, those kinds of things. And just, I remember I used to work every summer and live with my grandparents down in Nags Head, North Carolina, in the Outer Banks. And I had started working down there when I was maybe like 14. And it was great. I got to spend the whole summer with my grandparents. Became very, very close, an incredible relationship. But anyway, so it was the end of my sophomore year at Ohio University. And I had been up for 3 or 4 days, like a lot of students, studying for exams, taking diet pills to stay up all night and drinking coffee and all that kind of stuff. And I jumped in the car, and I remember I was driving by myself from Athens, Ohio, down to North Carolina, and I was in West Virginia. And I think I'd gotten probably 2 or 3 hours into the trip and hadn't even turned on the radio yet. I was that kind of out of it. And I remember turning on the radio, and I think for a lot of people now it's hard to believe. You're old enough to remember this, but there was no ESPN back in those days where you found out all the sports highlights the night before. You had to do all that, basically listen to the radio or whatever it might be. And I had not paid attention to sports for 4 or 5 days, and I turned on, and I remember the broadcaster, Don Crickey. He used to do these NBC radio sports updates for stations all over the country.
Did Notre Dame football at one time.
Yeah, well, he did a lot of things.
Yeah.
He was a very talented guy for a long time. And he just said, well, last night and whatever it was, some baseball race, one team jumped over another, and it kind of hit me. I'm like, that's the first time in I don't know how long, maybe my whole life, where I didn't know something was really going on sort of big in sports. And I thought, well, if that's the case, why not try to do something that's involved in sports? And so when I got to North Carolina, I called my dad. We started to talk a little bit about it, and I came back the next year and started working on a radio station, and everything kind of went from there.
That's interesting. Did your dad say, Tom, what took you so long?
No, him and my mom, I mean, believe me, they were just trying to get me through high school, Rick. It was, back in those days, it was a lot of fun to be a teenager. And so, no, they just wanted me to be happy and do whatever I wanted to do and be the best that I could at it.
Well, I'm old enough to remember what I call the great days of AM radio. And
Yeah.
the great Louis Grizzard, who was a columnist for the Atlanta Constitution, he wrote a column one time called Driving at Night Through Middle Georgia. And all he can find, again, he's in Middle Georgia, and all he can find are AM 50,000 watt stations listening to hockey games.
Yeah.
And he talks about going through these small towns, and then he ices the puck, and then he does. I mean, he's listening to the thing. So that was a great era. I grew up in Atlanta. And this is crazy, but I became a Chicago White Sox fan.
You got to be kidding.
Because in the late 1950s, early 1960s, I had a transistor radio, and I could listen to WLS in Chicago at night.
Wow.
In Atlanta.
Wow.
And see, at that time, we didn't have a baseball team. We had a minor league team, the Crackers. But I would listen. And I became, Smokey Burgess and Louis Aparicio. I mean,
Sure.
I was a huge White Sox fan because I could listen to their games on the radio. And I could also listen to the great Kaywood Lefford on Kentucky games because that came out of Cincinnati, I think, out of one of the 50,000 watt stations.
Well, yeah, WLW is the one even now you can get, in 48 states after like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I grew up doing that. So it's interesting. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about your career, but I want to ask you this. When you finally got back to Cincinnati and you now work with your dad, what was that like?
Well, it was interesting, because your perception of what it's going to be like, and I only bring this up because the guy who was running the Arizona Diamondbacks, where I was working, and he had allowed me to get out of a contract and leave to go back to Cincinnati. And I never thought I would leave Arizona. I loved living there. I met my wife there. Our kids were born there, baptized there. I love it there. I still love it there. But they had an ownership change, and things were just a little different than they were from the very beginning. Nonetheless,
Now, you worked for Jerry Colangelo first.
Yeah,
right.
Okay,
he was,
I got it. I mean, is the best boss I've ever had, without a doubt. I mean, the best. Love the guy, still do. So, there was an ownership change, and the new guys were great. They brought in a former agent, one of the most powerful agents in the country in baseball, a guy named Jeff Morad, who I liked very, very much, still do like him very much. And he and I could have very frank conversations about things. And I remember he said to me, look, I'm going to let you go. But he told me, I'm not so sure that it's a good idea that you do go. And he said, it's really, really tough. He said, I've had players that have gone back to their hometown. He said, you throw in the fact that you're going to go back and your dad is the guy, and I'm like, I've never cared about being the guy, but he's just like, he's a guy. And I found out later what he meant by that. But to answer your question directly, when I got here, I think my perceptions of what it would be like were very different than reality. My dad was involved at the end of a marriage. He was very unhappy. So he was not a happy guy. He was tough to be around, and he'd be the first to admit that. He was tough to be around for about the first 3-4 years that my family, when we moved back to Cincinnati. And then when, subsequently that 25-year marriage came to an end, and you never like to see things like that or hear things like that, but it was the right thing, I think, for everybody. And then, all of a sudden he met a woman shortly thereafter, and all of a sudden just did a total about face as far as being pleasant to be around, happy to be around, fun to be around. And it was everything then that you hoped it would be when you made the move in the first place. We just had so much fun over the next number of years, and still do now.
Well, you also worked with some other legendary people. You had a chance to call with Johnny Bench. You had a chance to work with Harry Carey. Talk about those guys.
Well, Johnny, it was just so funny, Rick, how the Lord works. When I was a kid, and my dad gets a job in Cincinnati in 1974, and the Reds used to have spring training back in those days in Tampa. And they played at Al Lopez Field, and I'll never forget, we were living in Virginia Beach, Virginia, when my dad got the job in Cincinnati, and And so we went down to Florida, my mom and sister and me, to go down there with my dad. It's the first time we had done anything with the Reds. And we get down there and he brings me in a clubhouse. It was a very different time. You could do those kinds of things then. Now it's, it's Gestapo, CIA stuff. The first four guys I meet are Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, and Tony Perez. Each of them hand me a bat, hand me a glove. I bring that up because now you fast forward. You asked about Johnny Bench. You fast forward roughly about 14 years, and I get a chance to start announcing some of the Reds games, 13 years. And Pete Rose is the manager, and Johnny Bench is my partner.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And Johnny was, he was great. He was such a star. I mean, I know there are guys today that are stars, but back in the 70s, the 80s, Johnny Bench was a star. I mean, he was a great player. He was great off the field. He was a smart guy in business. He was on the boards of different businesses, spokesperson of banks. He was on his game from the day he set foot out of Oklahoma into Cincinnati. And he taught me a lot about baseball and a lot about broadcasting. Harry Carey was without a doubt one of the top two or three greatest influences in my life, period. He was so full of life and fun, loved his job, but realized that there's got to be fun in that job. And that's really one of the very sad parts of broadcasting today. It's become so vanilla. It's become, don't say anything that's going to make anybody mad, especially at the local level. And Harry, he wasn't out to hammer anybody. But if they made a mistake, he'd let them have it and move on. But he was so much fun to be around, just every day, the way he lived his life and the way he looked at life and going out at night and hitting the town and the whole 9 yards. And I had a chance to do many of those nights, which I am paying for now at 57. But he was just awesome. He took me under his wing probably the first month that I was there. And never looked back. Just had a ball. It was so sad when he passed. Well, it's still sad.
Yeah, no. I told Lindsay Collins, my producer, today. We were talking about her grandmother, who's in a nursing home, and through COVID hadn't been out anywhere. And I said, Lindsay, if you don't drink and you don't smoke and you don't chase women, you might not live forever, but it'll seem like it. And you never, with Harry, he was going to go out on the town. I mean, he was going to be that kind of thing. I feel the same way a little bit about coaches too right now. The era of the big personality coach, they're all so corporate now. They have to be so careful about what they say. They can't be themselves. I grew up in the era of, like Bones McKinney was the basketball coach at Wake Forest. He was also a Baptist minister. I mean, he was just a larger than life guy. At one time, Lefty Driesell, was just they were characters. And so I do think we've lost some of that. Again, we've become such a corporate culture.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look, Rick, at some of the baseball guys, for example. You're right about the coaches. I mean, I think there's only probably one or two left where you're just like, I think Bob Huggins is still one of those throwback guys where, he's this big, strong, intimidating guy and really is not afraid to say what's on his mind. And he's not worried about what the media or what the fans think about him. I admire the heck out of the guy. Whether people like him or not, that's their decision. But, I look at baseball, and it was in the news last week where Tommy Lasorda was hospitalized. And I try to explain to people about what Tommy Lasorda was like every day. And I mean every day. One of the great showmen of all time. I remember when I was doing the Cubs games back in 1990, I mean, I couldn't wait to play the Dodgers, just to walk into Tommy Lasorda's office, because it was holding court in front of anybody and everybody who walked in there. The stories, the language, it was incredible theater. Lou Piniella, same thing. now these guys, they're, and I don't want to throw a blanket over all, because that's not a fair thing to do with anything in life. But you're right. It's become not only corporate, it's become vanilla, it's become boring. And I think that you're starting to see that have direct impact on every level, the corporate, boring kind of thing that's starting to affect, I think, baseball in particular, maybe some of the more so than some of the other sports.
Well, I think authenticity is one of the most critical things. I tell people a lot of time, unless you're Amazon or Walmart, you don't want to be a commodity. You want to live at the intersection of the authentic and the exceptional. And when it's like light beer. When you water the beer down to a point that it doesn't taste like beer anymore, then it's a bad thing. And I think we're seeing a little bit of this. I was reminding of one of the great basketball legends was a guy named Abe Lemons. Abe Lemons was the longtime coach at Texas, and he tells a great story. He was at I want to say maybe Oklahoma City College starting his career, and he said he had 65 training rules. And he gave the training rules to his kids, 65 rules. Well, one day his best player went out and stole an airplane. And he called him in and said, he calls him in and says, son, I'm going to have to kick you off the team. He goes, Coach, I got the 65 rules. Doesn't say anything about stealing airplanes. He goes, you're right. You start tonight. That's right. But right now, I think there are probably a gazillion rules that are out there that are just kind of crazy. This will probably be hard for you, but do you have a favorite game or a memorable game that you were part of?
Well, it was more the circumstances of what happened around it than it was necessarily the game itself, although you bring it up with people in Chicago, and they'll tell you it's one of the most heartbreaking games that they've ever seen, was the Game 6 of the 2003 National League Championship Series when the Cubs were playing the Florida Marlins. And that was the game a lot of people remember as the Bartman Game, where the ball goes down the left field line. Moises Alou goes over to try to jump in the stands and catch a ball. It was a critical eighth inning. The Cubs were 5 outs away from going to the World Series for the first time since 1945. A fan goes to catch the ball. And, for those that remember the game, what then took place starting that moment in time for the next hour and a half of my life, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like it in my life. I mean, it's a very long, drawn-out story, but it was just off the air. We had a camera that I could see in the booth of stuff that was going on with the guy down there with Bartman, which was just so shameful. I mean, it was just awful. They're throwing stuff at this poor guy. He's the biggest Cub fan in the world. Nobody wants to win the World Series or the Cubs to win the World Series more than this guy did. You get people who are drinking. They think that Alou could have caught the ball. I still swear up one side and down the other, Alou was not going to catch the ball. And Alou's reaction to it, I think, is what really sparked everything. He's out there competing. I get it. But, he basically just pointed the guy out, and then off it went from there. And so, they're throwing things at him. I can see off the air that the cops are going to take him out. I keep saying to our producer and director, I'm like, we got to quit replaying this, fellas. I said, enough is enough. I said, this poor guy, I said, not only think about tonight and right now, but what about tomorrow or the next day? And so, they get him out of there, and it was awful. I mean, they're throwing not only just cups of beer all over the guys, they're escorting them out, but people are finding objects that actually could hurt you that they're throwing at this guys. The cops are taking him out of there. And then again, and then the Marlins score 8 runs in the inning, most of it on an error. Somebody said to me they should have been throwing beer at the shortstop who let the ball go between his legs that led to 8 runs in the inning. But that's what happens. And then after the game, I'm walking out of the stadium, and I had done the Cubs games many years prior, and come walking out, and there's this big, huge cement wall that was put up that year. It had never been there the years that I was working, which is the entrance of the Cubs executive offices. And as we come walking out, we open the door because I knew the shortcut, and nobody else would go out of that door that was even in the whole stadium. And there's Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan standing there by himself behind this wall. And I had only met him once or twice, and he knew who I was, but I didn't know him. And I look at him, I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, you been out there yet? And this was right on the corner of Clark and Addison. This door is right under the marquee of the, Wrigley Field and all that. And he said, there's 200,000 zombies out there. I'm not going out there, because they had allowed no car traffic, only foot traffic. They literally had hundreds of thousands of people in the street anticipating going to the World Series. So my partners are Al Leiter, who is about 6'5", Steve Lyons, who's about 6'3", and we're meeting our producer, who's about 6'7". And I said, look, why don't you just get in among these three guys? They'll kind of surround you, and we'll just walk down the street. We'll get to a car and get you wherever you want to go. He's like, nope. He said, I don't care if I have to sleep here. I'm not going out there. I'm like, okay. So we leave, Michael Jordan standing there. And long story short, get back to the hotel. I wanted to go have a beer. I had a couple friend of mine that they were in town and never been to Wrigley Field before. He got them tickets to the game. I said, come on, let's go take a walk. So we walked down this place, have a beer. Well, we walk in this one place where Major League Baseball is having a party, and in there is Josh Beckett. Now, Josh Beckett's 21 years old. He's a big star pitcher for the Marlins. He had shut the Cubs out to keep the series alive in Game 5. And he's sitting at the bar having a beer. And I had met him a number of times through Lenny Harris, a former player for the Reds, really good guy who was then playing for the Marlins. And I walked over and I said, Josh, I said, look, this is none of my business. I said, but, I've announced World Series and teams that had Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling and some of the great pitchers of all time. I said, I don't think they'd be in the bar the night before Game 7. Your manager, Jack McKeon, told us if they needed you in relief tomorrow that you were pitching. He said, yeah. He said, you want me to tell you what's going to happen? I said, yeah, what's going to happen? He said, those starting pitchers are going to struggle. He says, I'm going to come in about the 4th inning, and I'm going to pitch the final 5 innings. I'm going to stick it up there blank. He said, and we're going to win this series, and we're going to go on and win the World Series. We're going to beat the Yankees. I said, really? He said, yeah, that's what's going to happen. Well, sure as hell, that's exactly what happened. He came in the 4th inning the next game, pitched the next 4 innings, gave up 1 hit. The Marlins win, and then he becomes the MVP of the World Series.
That was some beer that he was having.
I mean, tell him whatever he had, give me 5.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Bartman, that got replayed over and over and over. And you think about any other person, just instinctively, a ball hit, foul ball to you, you're going to go get the ball. I mean, everybody, I'm sorry it happened to him, but it would have happened to anybody. Okay, so he made a mistake. Coach Wood,
I don't even think it was a mistake,
yeah,
Rick. I mean, they're fun. Like you said, it's instinctive. I mean, there were 7 other people around him that tried to catch the ball too.
Yeah.
And I remember waking up the next morning. Game 7 was going to be that night. And I turned on the television, which I rarely ever do in a hotel room. I turned it on, and the first thing I see, the channel that comes up, is like an overhead from an airplane, helicopter of just some place. And you're thinking, well, maybe they had some explosion or something, robbery or something happened there. It was a helicopter circling the place where Steve Bartman worked on every channel in Chicago the next day. The Chicago Sun-Times made the decision. The Chicago Tribune had said they weren't going to do it. The Chicago Sun-Times put the guy's name in the paper the next day. And that's how we all came to know Steve Bartman. We'd have never known the guy.
And that's how you destroy lives. I mean,
and I tell you, I don't know if there's one guy I would love to meet, it would be Steve Bartman. Because, Rick, this guy, he was offered $2 million by Harry Carey's restaurant just to come down there and be a part of blowing up a ball that was recovered, that ball, that night. Bartman never got that ball. It was thrown back onto the field. And Harry Carey's had spent over $1 million. Sorry, my dogs are going crazy here. It spent over $1 million to get that ball, and they offered Bartman $1 million or $2 million to come in and be a part of blowing it up. And sure enough, he wouldn't do it. He has never done an interview that had anything to do with that night and that situation. Not one time. And I mean, I would just love to meet the guy and talk to him just for 10 minutes about what it's been like for him. I mean, he can't go anywhere in Chicago, if indeed he's still there.
Yeah, again, there was an old Paul Newman, Sally Field movie called Absence of Malice, where where she writes this damaging article about this construction executive who she's never met, and then he walks in her offices and says, "I'm so and so." She spills her coffee. I mean, the lack of accountability, and I always love retractions. I mean, I love that they'll put it on the front page and indict someone. And then when the retraction comes, it's on page 19.
That's right.
In small print because you know nobody cares. I mean, it's like no, I don't care that I destroyed your life or I made something up or I did that. But it's really tragic. Well, last June you I think would call it a mistake, an honest mistake. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Sure. You know, I mean, I used a word that Rick, look,
now you used a word when, and not on the air. You use a word in a time that you think the microphone is not on.
Yeah,
yes,
but it's a word that even if I'm sitting in my house, it's a word that I got to know better to say. And it's a slur, and the word is fag is the word that I used, and I say that now because ever since then, I have tried to right this wrong, and I've come to learn what that word means. And I've spoken with so many leaders in the LGBTQ community here in Cincinnati ever since then. I mean, it's been 90 days roughly since I said what I said. And of those 90 days, I probably spent 45 to 50 of them in some form or fashion with a gay community. Whether it be just in personal conversations, whether it be in meetings, whether it be on PFLAG meetings, which is an organization that's designed to help parents or primarily parents whose kids come out of the closet and tell them they're gay, and how you then deal with that as a mom or a dad when you get that kind of news or from a loved one. And I've spoken with them about using this word. And, we'll talk later, I'm sure, about, now trying to go out and to share that experience and what it was like and how it changed my family's life and how it changed my life professionally and personally by using that word and what it means and what its root is. And, the more and more I learned, a lot of people, a lot of people, Rick, will say to you, "Oh, man, how in the world don't you know what that word means?" And I don't mean what it means referring to someone who's a homosexual. I mean the root of the word, where it comes from, that kind of thing. And I've come to find out, I'll look at people all the time and say, "Really? Do you know what the root of the word is? Do you really know what it is before you start pointing the finger at somebody?" And you come to find out that you start sharing what that really does mean, like I did, and what that word means to people who are gay. And, a fag is a piece of kindling wood, one single piece. You put them together and they were referred to as faggots. And this is going all the way back to France and going all the way back to the 1700s, 1600s. And they would use that wood to burn gay people at the stake. That's where that comes from. And, I mean, that's pretty shocking stuff. As opposed to the word that most of us who are in our generation grew up hearing all the time at school, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I screwed up. I hurt a lot of people. I screwed up badly. And, I lost my job with the Reds, which I've been there the last 15 years. I was suspended. I've not lost it permanently, and good Lord willing, I won't, but there's nothing I can do about it. I just have to keep doing the stuff that I'm doing and learning and growing with Fox. And, we'll see how that all plays out. But, it's time to now start sharing that experience with others. And, thanks to you and thanks to some others, Jim Host, coming up with the idea and helping me to understand how I could go about sharing that with young people and how, look, I mean, I'm making $1 million a year. I mean, I got commercial deals with Kroger and Mercedes-Benz and getting free cars and, all this stuff that all of us place so much value on, right? And all of a sudden, and most importantly, Rick, I had a reputation, which I worked very hard.
Yeah,
Not perfect by any means, but a fallible
I
man.
get that. Tom, think about this. In your professional career, how many words did you use in broadcasting ball games?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because in this journey of now going to share my experience and what's happened to me, and that's the only reason I bring up about the money and about the cars and about the commercials, is because that's how you can let people know really, how much you screwed up and how much you messed up. And so, in the presentation I did with the West Virginia University men's basketball team recently, you just do the math, and my wife's looking at me, Polly, like I'm crazy, like you're not really going to put up all those numbers. And I really did put up all those numbers. If you just took roughly, and this isn't even close to being accurate because it's a lot more than this. But if you basically took 33 years of Major League Broadcasting, multiplied by 162 games per year, multiplied by 3 hours per game, multiplied by 60 minutes per hour, multiplied by 150 words per minute, which an announcer normally speaks, you do that with 27 years of the NFL, multiplied by 17 games, multiplied by 3 hours per game, multiplied by 60 minutes per game, multiplied by 150 words per minute. Those two sports alone would be 188 million words.
And one word changes everything.
One 3-letter word after 33 years. One 3-letter word ended, for how long we'll see, but it ended overnight my broadcasting career. I went from making money to zero income. Zero. I haven't been at zero income, Rick, since I was bussing tables and washing dishes at a restaurant when I was 13. But it's on me. I'm the one who did it. I'm the one who said it. I've learned so much since then. I still believe this is part of a bigger plan, and I really believe this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I really do.
Well, you've got a unique platform now. When you met with the basketball team at West Virginia, what were some of the key points you wanted to make to them?
Well, I think you look at whether it's the word I used and inclusion. A lot of the studies that have been done recently among NCAA student athletes, and you start talking to them about race, you start talking to them about any number of topics. The one that draws the most highly charged responses have to do with inclusion and about sexual orientation and gender identity. And so, the easiest thing in the world for a lot of these athletes and students and young people in general is to sort of, they'll keep using those kind of words, or they'll say hurtful things to people that they don't even know in some cases that they're doing, not the word that I'm using, but other things that they might say or do. And then the biggest danger that I try to tell them is the social media aspect of all this, and how you hit that send button. And I believe that, there are a lot of 4-letter words in this world that are not good words. I'm not so sure for this younger generation that the word send is not the most dangerous word. And that could apply to us adults as well. But for the kids, and I gave examples about, recently there were, 4 football players. I'm not even going to name the school, but there are 4 football players decided they saw this guy come out of a convenience store. He's got a 12-pack of beer. And they decided it's a great idea that we're going to go steal the 12-pack of beer. Well, not only did they go steal the 12-pack of beer, one guy decides that they're going to videotape it and just started knocking him around a little bit, scare him, push him, shove him down to the ground while they're taking his 12-pack of beer. Well, then one of the guys decides, wouldn't that be funny to put that up on the internet? Well, each of those guys, 4 of them, are getting to the tune of $70,000 a year worth of scholarships. You get 5 years to play 4. So for each kid, that's $350,000 for a 12-pack of beer. Scholarship gone. Others examples of where a bunch of girls are drinking and one of their friends passes out. Well, they think it's start funny, and all of us have done this, to start painting their friend while they're passed out with magic markers and stuff like that. Problem is they think it's funny to start putting swastikas on their friend. Well, guess what? Booted out of college.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that goes on, I'm just trying to share with them that, fellas, look, companies now, when you're applying for a job, 78% of them, the first thing they do when they get an applicant that they're seriously considering hiring is look at their social media pages. And this stuff will follow you around. And it could cost you a job. More importantly, it can cost you your reputation. And that's a hard one to build up, but it's a lot harder to build it back up.
No question about that. My wife, Charlotte, has a great concept about words. She will say, honey, think about the most beautiful piece of wood you can find and then drive nails in it. Yep, you can pull the nails back out of the wood, but the hole's still there. Mm-hmm. And that's the part you can't get back, Yep. And I'm all human beings. We're all, we've all said things we didn't mean. But like you said today on social media, it's forever. And we were at the Atlantic Coast Conference tournament a few years ago in Washington, D.C. We were playing. It was then the Verizon Center, and we're staying at the hotel where most of all the teams were staying at the Marriott. And we come back from dinner, and there are 4 Georgia Tech basketball players sitting in the hall. And my wife goes, guys, what are you doing? He goes, we're locked out of our room. And she goes, we can go downstairs and get you another key. So she, and she comes back and says, I love these guys, but there's a lot of stupid in that room.
Yeah.
It's part of it. What do you think you learned the most from this?
I learned, I think, Rick, to value people more. You talk about what's on the internet. If you go Google my name, and someone shared this with me just last week, because I've tried to do everything I can not to look at some of the stuff anymore on the internet. And I think someone told me the first 400 and something responses about Thom Brennaman are homophobe.
And that's not you.
I'm not a homophobe.
No, I know.
I never have been.
Right.
I never have been. I've never had anything against anyone on their race. My stepfather was an African American man. Had beautiful friends since the time I was 8 years old that were African American. I saw the Jackson 5 at the Hampton Roads Coliseum with my mom and my sister and some friends of ours who were African American sitting in the 4th row when Michael Jackson was about 10. I've never for 1 second held anything against anyone who is gay in any form or fashion. They want to be married and society decides them it's fine to be. Hey, look, they can be married. It doesn't matter one way or another to me. God bless them. They deserve the same rights as everybody else, whether it's applying for a job, keeping a job, all those things in society. But I used a word that all of a sudden put me in a corner where I've earned it. I earned it by using that word, period. I earned it. So, in all of these different areas where I've tried to learn and grow, I will say without a doubt that I have learned and I have grown. And the grace, the forgiveness, the support that I've received from the gay community. And, people who have kids, and I've met a couple of women who have gay children. And when I've said that to them, they've said to me, why would you be surprised by that? I said, because I hurt a lot of those people with the word I use. And they've both said to me, don't you think that they've been ostracized in a different way and for a different reason than the way you have been here the last 3 months? So why wouldn't they be more open to giving grace and forgiveness? Because they're marginalized in society every day, right? So, I think valuing people and trying to understand, and it's what I share with the basketball team. Look, when it comes to race or when it comes to sexual orientation, we're not all going to agree, and we don't have to agree. Two of the strangest bedfellows, so to speak, in Cincinnati that I've come to meet is a very powerful minister here in Cincinnati at a church, huge church, Christian church. But he's known all over the country, travels all over the world. Great guy, young guy, energetic guy. And he has become very good friends with one of the leading spokesperson for the LGBTQ community, gay man in Cincinnati named Chris Seelbach. And it all started when the minister did this, sort of fire and brimstone service one day about homosexuality. And the Chris Seelbach, who's a city councilman, the first gay city councilman ever elected in Cincinnati, he heard the sermon and it really upset him. And they tell the story that Chris will say, I know Brian is never going to change his view on homosexuality. He just doesn't have to be such a jerk. And I found that to be one of the most interesting things that I've heard from anybody during this whole journey.
Yeah, I think kindness matters. I think redemption matters. I think forgiveness matters. I think accountability and owning what we all do matters. But I don't think any of us are perfect. And I don't think any of us are ever going to be perfect. But I do believe that what you're doing now, talking to corporations, talking to young people, can help them see differently. And the ability to do that. And I'm also a big believer that you never know about what I call the quilt. And the quilt are all the stitches that you have out there, and you'll touch somebody's life that you don't ever know. Mm-hmm. But you will have said something that they will either respond to, or even more importantly, basketball players go home and tell their parents, I learned this, I saw this. That's going to be very valuable. Thom, I hope you're back in broadcasting somewhere next year. I'm very grateful for what you're doing right now. I appreciated your candor today, and I thank you very much for being with us today from the bridge.
Well, let me just say, and I don't say this, I don't say this, Rick, because you're having me on your show, but I just want people to know that, when you make the kind of mistake that I make, the only phone calls you're getting are phone calls, besides your friends and your family, are phone calls that are telling you they don't want you anymore to do this, whether it was the Reds, whether it was Fox, whether it was commercial endorsements you were doing for people. Those were the phone calls you're getting. And two of the phone calls I received were from Jim Host and shortly thereafter from Rick Jones. And people who didn't know me in your case at all, in Jim Host's case, who knew me barely at all, but who felt like, you know what, let's see if we can't do something to help this person. And you said kindness matters. And I will tell you that every day that I get up and every night when I go to bed and all points in between, for Jim Host and for Rick Jones to do what you guys have done for Thom Brennaman and more importantly, his family, I'll never be able to repay you, and I cannot thank you enough. And I just want people to know out there that that's the kind of person, if they don't know already, that's the kind of person that you are. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and you're very kind. I do think things happen for a reason in life. Yeah. I don't always know the reasons, but I think they do. And I'm absolutely certain so much good is going to come out of this for you and for others. And I think at some point in your life, you'll look back and go, I hated that it happened, but I'm glad that it happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we can go from that. Happy holidays, my friend. Take
Send
care.
you Merry Christmas and have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll visit soon, Rick. Thanks
buddy.
for your time.
We'll see you. Bye-bye. Let's take our final trip up on the old soapbox. Here's the question for the day. Whatever happened to forgiveness? I'm a Christian, and for Christians, Christmas celebrates the birth of Jesus Christ. The key to Christianity is the concept of forgiveness. I know that God forgives me of all my many faults, character flaws, and limitations. We need to learn from that and forgive others. Jesus once very eloquently said, "He who is without sin shall cast the first stone." The truth is we're all sinners and we all make mistakes. My New Year's resolution is to bear no grudges and forgive those who make a mistake. I hope you'll join me. The world desperately needs more forgiveness, both from here on the soapbox or wherever you might find yourself. It's fitting that our final trip on the road with Rick is to a special restaurant that is actually open 365 days each year for 24 hours, including Christmas Day. That's right. I'm talking about the famous Waffle House. I have a strong personal relationship with the Waffle House. Two guys in my home church, First Baptist Church of Avondale Estates, Joe Rogers and Tom Fortner, with the help from banker Clifton Davis, started the famous restaurant chain in the early 1950s. Joe Rogers was a cook at the Tottle House chain of restaurants when he bought a home in Avondale Estates from, yes, you guessed it, real estate agent Tom Fortner. In 1955, they formed a partnership to open the first Waffle House restaurant in Avondale Estates. Waffle House restaurant number 1 is now a museum with a more modern restaurant close by down the street. My dad loved the Waffle House. My dad was a government investigator, and he had a government per diem. He got paid a per diem, and so he figured out he could eat all 3 meals a day at the Waffle House and send money home to Mom. And so I think his dining at the Waffle House allowed my mom to buy groceries for several years. My best friend growing up, Tim Haynes, his daddy was a contractor, and Tim became a contractor like his dad. And what did he do? He built Waffle Houses for a living. He worked for Waffle House. And so there was a period of about 25 years, and anytime you saw a new Waffle House, Tim Haynes was the guy building that. All right, here's my Waffle House holiday story. I was a paper boy in my youth and delivered what was then the afternoon paper, the Atlanta Journal. The morning paper was called the Atlanta Constitution. They're now one paper, but in that era, they were two separate newspapers owned by the same company. The few times during that era that they actually combined papers was every Sunday morning and on select holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. On Christmas Eve, 1966, when I was 12 years old, I was staying up waiting for the newspapers to be delivered around 2 a.m. so that I could then, deliver them to the houses in the wee hours before I would head home and get some sleep before Christmas morning. Now, I would normally deliver my afternoon papers on my bicycles, or I actually would carry them and run and try to set records for how fast. The Saturday paper was always really small, and you could almost carry the entire route under your arms and try to set a record in that. But most of the time, I would ride my bike. But my mom or dad would drive me on Sunday mornings because the paper was very large, and they would also drive me on holidays. So I'm in my bedroom around midnight when my dad pokes his head in and says, "Hey, let's go eat at the Waffle House while we wait for the papers." I still remember that night. My dad was my very best friend, and it was great to be with him. He traveled a lot, and we didn't get much time together. While we were eating, a fully dressed Santa Claus came in to eat, and we all got a kick out of that. Like I told you, Santa eats at the Waffle House. I still love the Waffle House, and I've eaten there several times when traveling to visit family, even on Christmas Day. Now, here's my favorite Waffle House order. I like chicken and eggs, grilled chicken breast with fried eggs over medium, with hash browns scattered and smothered. That means you got grilled onions, you press them down flat, and you make them really, really crispy. I'll have a little side of wheat toast and some coffee. And just for kicks, I'll have a side order of pecan waffles too. Man, that's good eating on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or any other day or night on the road with Rick. That's a wrap on season 2 of From the Bridge. Thanks to my very special guest, Thom Brennaman, and all my guests this season, and to you, my listeners. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Let's hope 2021 is a whole lot better than 2020. We hope to see you back here in June when we get back out on the water from the bridge.